Hello, welcome to Communion. My name is Celia McBride, and today I am communing with John Streicker. Welcome, John.
Hi, Celia.
Such a great name, Streicker. It's like
Thanks.
forceful.
Yeah, it was also a name that you get teased a lot with.
I was going to say, I didn't think you would get teased with a name like Streicker because there's something powerful about it.
Yeah, although, there was Airplane with Leslie Nielsen, and they had this sight gag all the time. Like the guy was trying to remember the person, he'd say Streicker, 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 and then someone would punch a woman in the background. So yeah, there were things about it that weren't great, and it has a German spelling, so often it's mispronounced as Streicker. And growing up in the 70s, then yeah, we had streaking. So yeah, we were teased. But
so you were, that's interesting.
Yeah, but no more than any other kid.
Right. So you are a real Renaissance man, John. I lived in Ireland for a while and they used to say Renaissance instead of Renaissance because you are a professional engineer, you are a quilter, a sometimes graphic designer, politician, musician, published author. You were a professor in the West Indies.
Yep.
Tell me about that. How did you end up in the West Indies?
I had just finished some graduate work, and I wanted to try and see more of the world. And this opportunity opened up in Trinidad with the Department of Engineering, where they were looking for someone who was had done research in the field that I just completed. And so I didn't have a lot of extra background, but while I had been at the University of New Brunswick, I had convinced them to let me lecture courses there. And so I had a little bit of something that I could get my foot in the door, and then through the interview. It was exciting. And yet, just the week that I was due to go down, they had an attempted coup in Trinidad. Wow. And everything changed, right? And so I got there, but for the first several months there was martial law, and you couldn't integrate with the community yet because you had to be home by 6 o'clock every night.
Really?
Yeah.
How long were you there?
A couple of years. It was brief, but it was memorable.
And that was Trinidad?
Yeah. The University of the West Indies has 3 campuses, but engineering is in Trinidad, and then there's a campus in Jamaica and one in Barbados.
And did you get to mix with the culture eventually?
Oh, completely. Trinidad's not a tourist sort of country. It's one of the cultural centers of the Caribbean. Steel drums, or pan as they would call it, and calypso music, and the biggest carnival in the Caribbean. So East Indian food, and yeah, so you would forget that you were not of that culture eventually, because everyone around you was of that culture. And so you'd be out somewhere and you'd look over and you'd go, there's a white person here, and then you'd realize you're looking in a mirror way off, and so yeah, you would forget. And if they were really paying me a compliment, they would call me a red man, because if you blend the sort of the black with the Spanish, you would get sort of this red color of complexion. And so if to pay me respect would be call me red, because then they would be implying that I'm a little local.
Wow. And so were you tempted to stay there at all?
Oh, for sure. There were tremendous reasons to want to stay, but also I had known that it was an exploration. I feel Canadian, and there were aspects of the culture that didn't resonate with me, in particular where they were in gender politics, and where they were in. They had a great way of embracing life, but they weren't where I was at with my interests. Right. So ultimately, it was a wonderful experience, and I've been back to the Caribbean often to work over the years. I've been to many of the countries, actually. Yeah.
So tell me what that means to feel Canadian.
Oh, it's a funny thing, the idea of feeling Canadian. It's almost the sort of the art of nothing. It's when you try and grab hold of it is when you lose it. Right. So it's a little elusive in its quality, but you you get a sense of it right away. Like I can remember when I lived overseas, and I've lived overseas a few times, listening to Radio Canada International and picking up the Globe and Mail or something that would give me a sense of what was going on. Being Canadian has in it sort of that, not apology, but a little bit of a humility in the North American sense, and yet a sense of making a difference, I think, as Canadians. Like, I think we want to try and create the world that we believe in. Yeah, something like that. I don't know. It's a work in progress. How's that?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because you mentioned the apology, and I think that's something that a lot of Canadians say, is that something that makes us particularly Canadian is our, we bump into the door and we say sorry, that kind of thing. And I think it's interesting. I don't know if it's necessarily true uniquely to Canadians, but certainly there is something of the apologist, maybe. We feel...
Well, one of the things for us is that, especially when you start to live overseas, you recognize that other places of the world have more neighbors. They have more languages. They have more cultures which are coming up against your border. And in Canada, we have one culture, and it's not so distant from our own, right? And so as a result, we don't have a lot of comparison, and the people that we happen to be comparing ourselves against happen to be the dominant culture on the planet. So that's a weird situation to be in. So our apologies are more relative to the American people, who, in some ways we can think of as loud and boorish, but in other ways I think we're also jealous of their sort of upfront nature.
I think maybe, because you said feeling Canadian, which maybe is a little bit different than being Canadian, but one of the things I feel about being Canadian is space. And I'll never forget when I was first living in Ireland and walking along the streets in the city centre, Grafton Street in particular, which is a brick street which has no cars on it. It's just for pedestrians. And jammers, really packed with people. And people don't get out of your way. Like you're moving and they're actually banging you. And the Canadian in me turns, to say, oh, sorry, but they're gone. Like nobody's apologizing for bumping into you. And it used to make me crazy. And then I realized, wow, these are people that have maybe grown up, not everybody, but in a bedroom with their 3 brothers and sisters. Like they just don't have a sense of the space that we have. Now you've lived all across Canada, so you have a real understanding of our space and the kind of space that we live in.
Yeah, that we span.
Yeah.
And it's even relative within Canada. So there have been some places where I've lived where the community is very dense, and there's also been, living here, like for example, my wife and I were staying downtown one night, and we got up early to head back to Marsh Lake, and 3 cars went by on 6th Avenue or something like that, and my wife went, huh. And I turned to her and I sort of laughed and I said, were you just harumphing at the traffic? And she was, because 3 cars was too much. So we're amazing beings, human people, and we have a range of tolerances that we can acclimatize to them, like whether that's weather or whether that's the cultural reality or the density of people. So I've worked in the middle of the Sahara and come out and been shocked when I saw a paved road. So it does change. For Canadians, I think we share at least a bit of a sense of the expanse of the country. And I think it's even deeper in us when we embrace the North. So if you live in or come from the north, then your sense of space is bigger still. Yeah.
Absolutely. So what brought you to the north?
Oh, it brought me, I'm not sure. I think I was still, even though I'd lived in a lot of the provinces, I'd never found where I wanted to make home. And I had a slightly romantic notion of the north and the Yukon. And I got some work with Natural Resources Canada the very first time I came north of 60, and then the second time I came north of 60 was to the Yukon, and it was it. Like I had a life list, and right at the top I wrote, live in the Yukon, and from there it's been a sort of a trajectory ever since.
Right. So how many years have you been here?
I'm just about coming 12 years, and this so February will be 13 for me. Yeah.
Okay. Huh.
Yeah, short but also long, like meaningful. Yeah. Short time but a meaningful time.
Yeah. It's interesting too, the Yukoners and the short, long time. I met a woman who had been here for 22 years and asked a guy how long he'd been here, and he said 8 years, and she said, "Oh wow, you're still a Chichaco." And I just thought, Yukoners are just long-time Yukoners just can't. You can never be here long enough for a long-time Yukoner to be a Yukoner.
Right.
If you're from here, I'm born here, so I've always got that. Like I was born here. I get to say that and really feel like I'm.
Well, yeah. I hope that it's not a competition. I hope that it's.
It is a little bit.
Well, I know, of course, there is that, and I even cheated somewhat, because when I came here, right away I met my wife, and she was a single Yukon woman living out in a cabin, and she'd lived in that cabin before power was out there or water or anything. And so for me to show up and sort of walk into that was considered a bit of an affront. There were lots of suitors of my wife who came up and sort of put their hands on their hips and told me
where it was at. You haven't done your time.
Yeah.
You haven't done your time to get this woman.
Yeah. So, and I respect that in that is this intense love of the place, and that we don't want to squander it on people who don't care about the place. And so, there's a good side to this whole idea of what makes you a Yukon or not. And I don't think that I hold, all, that I embrace everything that we're a pretty widespread group of people, but there is something that unites us, and I think it's this love of place, this idea that this is a special place. I have that. So I think when people meet me, I think that they get that idea quick enough, and then I'm here as long as I have been, but I intend to be here forever. So.
All right. Oh, wow. Well, I want to ask you a few things. One of the things I want to ask you is, how does a professional engineer become a quilter?
Right. Well, my grandmother used to quilt. And I think as a person, I've had a lot of privilege in my life. Like my parents, I grew up in a great home, and I've had the opportunity to be educated. And somewhere fairly early on, really quite early on, like say 4 or 5, I already started to have a sense that the world was bigger than me, and that it was a fascinating place. And so I don't, with that, and with parents, I think, or a family that allowed me to explore my ideas, I never, for whatever reason, didn't go down the pathway of, okay, I need to have a career and it needs to be this. And really early on, I started to recognize that choices in life made a difference, and so that you allow yourself to take on those choices, and you don't narrow what it is that you want to do. So I can remember, in fact, when I was doing work actually in Barbados at the time as an engineer, and I said that I was going to break away because I wanted to I wanted to explore a more creative avenue, and quilting just, I talked to a friend and I said, let's do some art and design, and she said, well, let's focus on something, and I said, well, you can pick, because I'm pretty wide open, and she picked quilting because I'd already made a dozen quilts in my life and
Right.
sold them at a market. And so I think the big story for me is that I see life as a series of experiences, and I don't think that life is just lived through an occupation. I think it's lived in how we express ourselves all the time. And I've been lucky enough to not worry too much about how to get by. I'm happy to get by with less if it means that I'm able to do more.
Right. Where do you think that comes from? Because that's an amazing attitude to have, and it's an amazing way to live your life. And I don't...
Yeah, we don't all do it.
We don't all do it,
No.
but I think so many of us have that desire. I mean, I think the I guess the spiritualization of abundance and the personal growth industry, like the Wayne Dyers and the Marianne Williamsons, they're connecting to something in people that is huge, which is, follow your intuition, follow your passion, let go of thinking that you have to do something, you have to be something. And do you think that, how did you get that? Did you get that from your parents? Did you get that from listening to your own inner wisdom? Where's that come from?
And I'm not sure, I'll give you my answer, but I don't know that it will ever encapsulate everything. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I think makes it possible is that I have opportunity to do it. So by that I mean that I've got a couple degrees in the background, and if something goes wrong, I can always go to those, right? Mm-hmm. So it's that awareness that I'm okay to try these things. So that's one of it. And then I think that we're a fairly affluent society. There are a number of us that should be able to do that sort of thing here and there. A bigger piece might be that I somehow, somewhere, I tried it. Like maybe it was traveling with a soccer team to England as a 10-year-old and figuring out that you had more fun if you went and asked people to dance than if you stood on the side, or maybe it was a public speaking thing in grade school, or I'm not quite sure, but there were enough rewarding experiences, and I certainly have a busy mind. I don't, earlier when we were just getting ready and this was all sort of setting up, we were talking about, I was going to say something and then it got stopped, and I thought to myself, well, yeah, there's lots of ideas. They keep coming. So I think that definitely some of it is inside of me, but I think also I've had the good fortune to have a family that encouraged my siblings and I they challenged us, in fact, to be thinking people. And to not to try and not accept anything, but more the serenity prayer. The idea of learning to accept those things that you must accept, and having the courage to try and change the things that you can, and being wise enough to figure out the difference between the two. And so that little ethic was there enough in me, and that it came forward, and from an early age, I had figured out that I didn't necessarily have to follow the path that everyone else. I would rather keep choices conscious than to sort of, and it doesn't mean that if everyone's doing something, I might do it because that's what I want to do, but there's a reason there somewhere. And then ultimately, you start to see that there's an ethic involved, right? And that it's coming back to, does it fit with the world that you're trying to create, and the one that has provided so much for us, this abundance that you were speaking about.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned the Serenity Prayer, and you rewrote it. You rewrote the Serenity Prayer.
Right, but I did that just in a moment, so I'm not sure that I can even remember what I rewrote.
So
do you want to get close?
Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. You wrote, I think, to grant me the serenity to embrace the mystery.
Right.
And which I thought was really, I love that, and I love that idea about not. You also said you have, there's a lot of room for gray in your thinking, in your world, and my sense is that embracing the mystery of whatever all of this is so vital to having some kind of serenity in life, or some kind of peace, because there's just so much that we don't understand.
There's a theory out there, so I'm a science geeky person too. So, and the theory goes that the amount our knowledge is growing. Mm-hmm. However, the amount that we don't know is growing faster.
Right.
So the idea is that, yeah, we're learning, but we shouldn't be so arrogant to think that we've got it sorted out. And in that amount of unknown comes the mystery, and comes hopefully some humility. And for some people will come fear, but for me will come potential, like an idea that whenever we're confronted with something challenging, there is room. There's an opportunity to try and create something beautiful or elegant out of those challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said something about arrogance, and this I want to ask you about this, because your field of study is geodynamics.
Yeah.
Which is how the earth changes over time.
Yeah.
And so that has led you into the world of climate change.
Yeah.
So this is kind of, this is the way my brain works.
Okay.
Is, if we look back over how the earth has changed over time,
right,
we have stories like the Ice Age. We have stories like the extinction of the dinosaurs.
Right.
Right now we're looking at the earth and the changing of climate and the unpredictability of weather and temperature.
Right.
Do you think that the issue that we really need to be focusing on is climate change? Or do you think it's something deeper than that, which is actually, I don't have any control over the changing of the climate, but what I do have control over is my fear of not having enough, which leads to me to overconsume. I just sort of think that it's another issue. What do you think about that?
I think you're mostly right. And of course, there's a lot of opinion in here, right? So, so the stories that we get about those extinctions, they come to us from the earth itself. That's who tells us those stories, and they're pretty. They're page turners, like when you actually get into those stories. Every great extinction that we've had on the planet has been related to a fairly quick changing of the climate. Anything from abrupt to sort of centuries long. So the earth tells us something there, and we try to learn. Like, one of the reasons that we look backwards in time is to try and understand going forward, right? That's important to us. And the Ice Ages give us another story. And the Ice Ages are a much more recent story for us. And they brush across human stories now. And so certainly for those cultures that have a long oral tradition, like the North, we get those stories. And the earth also tells us its stories, and mostly I bring the stories of the earth, and I talk to those people that have the stories from people, from the land, and we try and put those two things together. So climate change is totally an example. It's the issue that's here. And the way I think about it is that we are human beings, a species, a people that have decided to grow. And almost all growing things will grow. They want to grow, right? It's built in. So it was never wrong that we've tried to grow and expand and multiply and be abundant, right? To live abundantly is a wonderful thought. But it can't be endless. It's a finite planet. And oh, yes, the resources, the space is finite. So, and it's easy, like as a 5-year-old, when we took the first Apollo 8 mission and we flew to the moon, you know, all these engineers set up this huge expedition to go off the planet for 3 days in a little metal thing. And, you know, the rockets are burning backwards, so they're looking forwards, and they fly to the moon, and they go around it, and they've got all these cameras to look at the far side of the moon because we'd never seen it. And they're taking all these pictures, and they come around, and suddenly there's the Earth rising. And all 3 of those astronauts catch their breath, and they're going, oh my God. And they didn't bring any color film because that wasn't, you know, we're not going to take a look at the Earth. Like, who wants to see the Earth? And yet it turns out to be the most, it was a momentous occasion because in that moment, and luckily one of the astronauts had in his personal baggage 1 roll of color film, and they madly pulled out the camera and, you know, rewound the black and white, put on the new roll. They bracketed it twice. They got 2 pictures. And that picture came to me when I was 5 years old. And in that moment, I could see, well, there we are. It's a beautiful place. It's not got a lot of political boundaries that you can see. It's got a lot of clouds. There's oceans. There's continents you could see. And but that's it, right? Like it's finite. So if that's the case, if we're a species that wants to grow, and part of that growth is consumption, and we continue, it can't go on forever. There's limits to it. And it's not hard to recognize then that at some point in our history, we're going to bump up against those limits. Well, the dodos figured it out, or well, you know, they didn't unwittingly, they became one of the limits. But there are other things now, and the climate is the first. Like, you might think the ozone, but that problem actually was solved. It didn't take so much, or acid rain, those issues got resolved. We thought it might be agriculture, you know, back in the 1800s, and then we got the Industrial Revolution, and we increased yields, and we figured out how to get more out, but it didn't matter. Sooner or later, you get to a limit. It turns out that climate is the first big global limit that we will hit. And it's actually related as well to oil and gas. And these 2 issues, as they intertwine and they come together, they will be the experiment where we figure out as a collective species on the planet how to get ourselves in balance. You can't continue without doing it. So if you don't figure out how to come back into balance and to sustain yourself, you won't sustain. And therefore, we will. Will we do it the hard way or the easy way? I'm hoping that we'll do it in a thoughtful way. And then the whole exercise becomes a lesson to us in figuring out how to exist on the planet in a way which is more in tune with the natural world, the place that provides for us. And I think also, and I'm hopeful also, that it's a step forward in us moving from an us and them world into a we world, into a place where we recognize that it's a shared experience, that it's a journey that we take together. So there is some arrogance, I agree, in thinking that we are changing the climate or that we can do something about it even.
I just don't think, I mean, all of that, what I hear from all of that is that it's a question of balance within the human life.
Yep.
As opposed to, the issue is not climate change. In fact, people, the issue is, how do we live in harmony with ourselves and with each other? This is, but a symptom over here, right? This
Right.
is the thing that's indicating that we need some help with this. But really, the headlines shouldn't be reading, danger, danger, climate change. It's like, I think it should be like danger, danger, spiritual void, like something's missing. We've lost that connection. Maybe we never had
The
it.
compass or the way, or
To that photograph of the earth going, wow, we're one organism.
Yeah. Well, all right. So let me cover off a couple of little things. The first one is, you talk about the headlines, and the media doesn't work to help us find our direction in life.
That's true.
So the media works on a time frame and an issue which is really, often sensationalized. And even around the issue of climate, like I am forever scratching my head, or worse, banging it against the cupboard, saying, no, okay, you can't, if we cheat in our description of this issue to the public, then the public will stop believing that we're honest and sincere about it. And so ultimately, the headline is climate because that's what the story the earth is telling us.
Yeah.
So we have to take that story because it's what we have. Right. So does it speak about deeper things? Yes. And do I frame it all in the negative? No, because, well, first of all, I couldn't keep working on the issue if I didn't have some sense that we've got somewhere to go. Right. And I'm certain we do. And the question is just how we get there, really, is all I'm thinking about. Mm-hmm. And if, for example, Celia, if all we do is come up with some sort of technological fix for climate change, some geoengineering, then we won't have addressed these deeper issues that we're on about. And it'll be good in the sense that it will buy us time. Like, it is a very big issue about how we're going to produce agriculture to feed the world, and we're a hungry world, and we're a thirsty world, and we need to make sure that we're able to do that, because the alternative is strife and definitely loss of life, and it's significant, not little stuff. So we do have to get that figured out, but I am really hopeful that we as a group of people that share this planet, and that are lucky enough to be here, also figure out that there is something intangible that is given to us by virtue of being part of this whole thing, and that we need to treat that with a lot more respect and I don't know, I guess faith.
Yeah. We're on the case, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, like I do. I do think we're moving in these directions. It's hard to understand, sometimes when you're working on these issues and you're right up against it, and
all we see is the problem.
And we see the little backward steps, and you invest your whole heart into some of these things, and then someone, they do things which are sometimes silly and sometimes reprehensible, and you take it to heart. So so it's tough, and that's when I go back to that image of the earth. For me, I guess that's one of my touchstones, is because that one of the things it tells me is that if I adopt a different perspective, I still see that potential, that mystery. And so regardless of what I'm able to accomplish in life, or you are, or we are, it's a beautiful world, and it's going to be here for a long time, and I just hope to do my best in getting it right.
Yeah, and we can love science and we can have faith. I love that.
Oh,
I
yeah.
say that. I mean,
these are not mutually exclusive.
They're not either ors, and embracing the mystery is a practice that we can bring into the difficult times?
Yeah, I don't believe that science has all of the answers, right? And so I think that science shouldn't be shunned. I mean, recently Sarah Palin, the vice presidential candidate in the last U.S. election, referred to climate scientists as, all climate scientists as snake oil salesmen. And I was just at the University of Alaska, Anchorage, to give talks on climate change. And I was sort of like, well, okay. And I retitled my talk as Snake Oil Salesman. So,
wow, good for you.
yeah, so I think that there's a role, but this truly is a shared world, and science doesn't corner the market on how, and neither can we burden science with dealing with all of it. And so really we need to figure out inside ourselves and as a group, because right now I think we're living with a bit of a dissonance inside of us. Like we know what we ought to be doing, and we know we're not quite doing it yet. And as Canadians, that's jarring for us. And I think there's going to be a huge collective sigh of relief when we start actually getting down to it and addressing some of this, the path forward. I mean, I don't see the end yet, but I see the way.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of us are, and I think that's the other piece that gets forgotten, is that somehow there's this waiting for everyone to get on board together. And again, if we look to history, that we could keep waiting for that, but more often than not, it's, there's a larger group of people who get on board together. But and I think there is a large number of people on board.
Yeah,
now.
we're moving.
So speaking of either or, I just want to ask you some either or questions,
sure.
And then we'll probably wrap up, since I don't know if the television audience can see our breath, but I can see yours. So either or.
Yeah.
Ernie or Bert?
Oh, well, I used to always be Ernie, but later I became more Bert. So, and I hope I'm not gray on everything, but okay.
CBC 1 or CBC 2?
CBC 1.
CBC 1.
Yeah.
Thelma or Louise?
Oh my goodness. Okay. I liked Thelma in the early part of the film and Louise in the last part. Louise really did have an arc to her character. So
I think they both did.
Yeah, they did.
They both did.
Yeah.
Luke Skywalker or Han Solo?
Han Solo. Yeah.
Sure. Would anybody choose Luke Skywalker in that one? I don't know. This one's a little darker, but burial or cremation?
Oh, well, if it is burial, I don't want much to do with it. I like to try and get back into the system. So, I don't know what happens spiritually beyond, but certainly in a corporal sense, in the skin and bone sense, that's where I come from. So, however to get back there quickly. Yeah. So I teased my wife once that maybe you could put me up at the top of one of the mountains nearby and let the ravens come.
Right.
But she was aghast at that, so it's not going to do that.
And would you say you're a lover or a fighter?
Oh gosh, I think a lover, but we better ask my wife that one.
Okay, we'll get Susan in here next time.
Yeah.
And glass half full or half empty?
Oh, I've got a friend, Sherry Ryan, who is a Newfoundland singer-songwriter. And it's her line that I love. And she says that my cup runneth over since I use a smaller one. So I want to cheat the system, and I want to use the cup, and I want to downsize it, and then it's full. But it also is a bit of a metaphor for trying to recognize that this abundance isn't endless.
Well, I think maybe another episode would be abundance versus greed, because I think they're
Right.
two different things.
Yeah, that's another conversation.
Yeah, it is. So, John Streicker, thank you for communing with us today. Thank you for being here.
It was a pleasure,
For
Celia.
being my guest.
Yeah.
This is Celia McBride, and this has been Communion.